I'm Shannon Moore, and this is Formation. Today, I'm having a conversation with someone whose embrace of uncertainty helped strengthen their faith. Join us. Welcome to Formation, a weekly podcast from University Christian Church in Fort Worth, Texas, where each week I sit down with people and we talk about faith. Today, I am so happy to have with us Stephanie Hord. Stephanie, hi.
Shannon, hi.
How are you?
I'm good. I'm glad to be here.
How long have you been at UCC now?
Oh, gosh. That's hard to say because 1010 was in the works for so long before it was actually
Right,
for a
you were
couple
in
months.
the planning of it,
Yeah. So I want to say August of 2021. Does that sound right?
Yeah, because 1010, our casual service, has been going on for about 3 years
Yeah.
now. So, and you were there from the planning stages.
Yeah, that's
and
right.
First Sunday.
The Zoom
and
calls when we couldn't meet in person.
That's
still.
right.
Yeah.
That's right.
Uh-huh.
Well, we're so glad that you are. What I usually say about you is that you're the secret sauce for that service. You're our musician, and you really help us make that service really who we are. So many casual or contemporary services strive to be something that the church is not. But the way that you lead the music in that service really feels genuine to who our church is. And so I really appreciate that. And we're going to talk about that a little bit more later.
Sure.
But one of the things that I usually ask folks just right out of the gate is to tell me about your childhood faith experience, or what.
Oh, man.
What
It is formation after all, right?
it is formation. Yes.
So I grew up, I was actually born in Miami, Florida. My parents, who had both graduated from Howard Payne University, which is a Baptist college in Brownwood, Texas.
They're both Texan.
They are both Texan. My dad actually went to Southwestern Baptist Theological Seminary to get his master's. And they had moved to South Florida to plant churches. And so I was born in the middle of all of that when my dad was still an associate pastor at a Baptist church there before they decided that it was time to, go out and try to start their own thing, in South Florida.
Their own Baptist
Their
thing?
own Baptist
Okay,
thing, yes,
okay.
yeah, with definitely still within the Southern Baptist Convention,
Okay.
just wanting to start a congregation in various parts of South Florida. So I grew up with a lot of very evangelical ideas, a lot of very conservative ideas about what it means to be a Christian, what it means to, I guess, spread that in the world. And not to say that I necessarily had a bad faith experience as a child. Some of my fondest memories are doing those things with my parents when I was really young. And I think the more, I would say, those were really, I would say, formative years for my faith. But I would think the most formative years were actually probably when we moved back to Texas when I was 13. And I think there was just lots of things for me as I was growing up, as the world was changing, as I was changing, that just did not align with the way that my parents had told me to view the world through the lens of my faith. And so I think that, as I was a teenager, I started to kind of question those ideals that to me, despite saying all are welcome, despite saying that, God looks out for the poor and the outcast and all of those things, despite all of those things being told to me, and I knew that they were true, I felt those things deep within me, I just didn't see that reflected in the faith that my parents and the congregation they belonged to and the people around me that they held and the way that they view the world. And so I think just like over time, I started to kind of deconstruct that. There was some real there was some real turmoil around that in my life about deciding whether or not it was worth reconstructing beyond my deconstruction, whether it was something I really wanted to believe and pursue, and whether I could be who I am in the context of that religion. And so during college, I just kind of had a moment where I had to say, something's got to give. I believe all of these things about the God of the universe. I believe all of these things about the world that God wants. And religion doesn't align with me, like with that right now. And so I kept thinking to myself, and I went to church, not to church, I went to school at a Baptist university in Abilene called Hardin Simmons University. And
And that's related to the Church of Christ. Is that correct?
no, that's incorrect. It's part
It's
of the
Baptist?
Baptist,
Okay.
yeah, Baptist. ACU
AC, that's what
is
I
the
was
Church of
thinking
Christ
of.
one. Yeah,
Gotcha.
yeah. So lots of very, I guess, conservative evangelical influences around me during my college years. And I guess a better way to put it would be to say fundamentalist influences about religion, that like, this is literally what it says. This is how and viewing that very strongly through the lens of an American interpretation of that, as opposed to, kind of a global interpretation. And so it was really difficult in that space to really extricate the politics of religion from that and how they're kind of inextricably linked for American evangelicals. And I just kept saying to myself, like, there's so much anecdotal evidence in my life, in the people around me, that were people who were so full of life, so dedicated to the idea that God is for us and seeks us out and seeks for us to love others and love our neighbor in the way that that Jesus represented in his ministry, that was so at odds with everything that was coming at me from, the school that I went to, from my family and all that other stuff, that in that moment when I decided something needed to give, it was actually this really odd moment where I went home one summer, my junior year, and I was sitting at home with our family dog, and I sat there and I was just kind of lamenting this. Like, I was crying, that I was like, I can't see a way forward. I know, God, you are for me. I know that, I know that there is more than what I am able to interpret right now. And I just need help. I want to follow this. I want to believe in following Jesus. I want to do all of these things. And I just can't reconcile it right now. And I had this moment where I was just sitting there, and our dog's name was Holly, and just petting Holly, and she's looking up at me, and, I'm crying, as you do with dogs, and pets and things like that. And I just had this epiphany that I said, if my dog can love me no matter what, no matter who I am, no matter how I vote, no matter what I do, then surely the God of the universe is capable of more love than my dog. And it was like, from that moment on, it just clicked. It was like, I think I can pursue this. I think I can seek out who I believe God is, despite all of the fundamentalist kind of evangelical upbringing that I had. And just kind of from that point forward, it was just this long process of kind of delineating who I believed God to be and seeking out people who could help me parse that out, and reading books and all that other stuff. And so I think if it weren't from Holly, if it weren't for my dog, I would not be sitting here today. But also for all the people that came after on that journey too, that were just kind of like shining examples of what it means to love other people, and what it means to really love your neighbor, and what it means to look out for the outcast, and look out for the poor, and look out for those who don't have a place in what we would consider, quote unquote, normal society. And that just really shaped the faith that I have now. And I want to say too that I don't believe that I've reached the end of that. I think that part of that formation is acknowledging that the one thing I am for certain of is that I am not certain. And so I think my faith kind of evolved from this very certain God is in this box. We know what God wants. We know what God believes. We know all of these things into, I think God still speaks. And I think that I think we can always be seeking out what it is God might want for this present moment or for the world, or how can we interpret the way Jesus walked in the world better in our current context. And so I guess to kind of encapsulate all of that, it would be a move from certainty to seeking.
I love the way you phrase that, and I'm curious if there was something especially compelling about Jesus during the time when God was in the box.
Yeah.
Was there something about Jesus that helped you want to break God out of that box, or was it just your thinking about the nature of God?
No, totally. Definitely Jesus. And I don't mean to delineate them as like these very separate things. I think it was just, I think the reason I specify on God is because for all the ways that the faith of my childhood pointed towards Jesus, what they were really talking about was God in the kind of fire and brimstone kind of ways that God lords over the earth kind of deal. And so I think actually seeking out Jesus was the thing that kind of made that more clear for me, is to say that like, Jesus deliberately during his own ministry takes God out of the box and says the ways that the religious people of that time, the ways that you have, pinned God down to support you, to support the ways that you think the world should be, is not the way the world is. It's not the way God sees the world. And I'm telling you that as this messenger. I'm telling you that as someone who truly believes that, the last and the least will be first, And I think too, in a more specific sense, I even think that the one, I really don't want to butcher this verse, so I'm just going to paraphrase it, that says, you will leave father and mother, all of that other stuff. That was a really clarifying kind of red letter passage for me that was like, you know what? I think following Jesus could fall within me leaving the religion of my parents behind. That
Even if they get mad about it.
yes, even if they get mad about it, even if it harms our relationship because they hold so tightly to these ideals. I think Jesus actually was the defining factor of that seeking thing, in saying that like, in the ways that Jesus sought out other people in this and took God out of that box, I think was a great kind of example of what that could look like. Not to say I'm Jesus, that's absolutely not what I'm saying, but what that could look like for me in my own faith journey, to say that like the ways that Jesus in his ministry, he is saying, you have heard it said this, but actually it's this, is kind of was kind of how I was viewing the world. It's like, how I have heard it said, but what is, where is it? How can we be better? How can we love more? How can we, kind of thing. And so I don't know. I think that's that God still speaks thing is kind of referential to that, in that, what is that for us in 2024? We have heard it said this, but, what is the opposite? What do we actually need to be seeking out?
Fascinating. We are going to, let's talk about that a little bit more. We're going to take a short break,
Yeah.
and then we will be back to continue this conversation with Stephanie Hord.
My name is Rob,
And I'm Jason.
and we serve on the tech team at 1010.
I have a background in film and video, so it's been awesome to be able to bring that to this volunteer opportunity here at UCC. I do the cameras that we switch back and forth between those, and able to broadcast on our live stream out to folks who aren't able to be here in person.
And I run the slides for the lyrics during the songs and also while the sermon's going on, and also do some of the lighting. And for me, I think I just enjoy being a part of what makes the service happen behind the scenes.
Well, we are back. We're continuing this conversation with Stephanie Hord. So, Stephanie, your dad was a Baptist minister, went through all the Baptist upbringing that so many of us did, and some of it very fruitful and
Sure.
valuable. That I always look back on. I'm the same way. I look back on with fondness on some of that early childhood religious experience. It was very foundational. But now you've talked about getting God out of the box and Jesus helping you and your dog helping you
Yes.
to do that. So how did that play out in your faith? Because at this time in your life, early 20s or somewhere thereabouts, finishing up college, did you stay at the Baptist school for your last year?
Yes, I did. Yeah.
How did that play out as you're exploring a new faith expression in a very traditional conservative place?
Yeah.
And how did it play out in the rest? That would have been a good a prime time for you to leave.
Sure,
Yeah.
yeah. I was actually talking about this the other day with my wife, Kate. I was telling her that I look back on that early 20s me that was in her junior and senior year at HSU. And I think, oh my gosh, she was braver than the Marines. I mean, like not, in a joking way, in that, like, I was so contrarian. It was like I was on not a war path, but every single thing that I was like, as I started to think about it, I said, that's unjust. That's not right. And I cannot believe our school props that up. I can't believe our faith is propping that up, that we don't say something about that in chapel or, kind of thing like that. And I would go to the administration. I would put together like groups of people that's like, hey, this new housing plan that you've just put up is really unjust and unfair to people who like can't afford it, or people that, like just insert whatever thing here. And I think back on it sometimes, and I think, not in a superior way, but if I would not have been having those hard conversations with people who were deeply entrenched in the same kind of ideology that I was, I don't think it would have provided a good enough sounding board for me to really refine what it was that I believed. So in a lot of ways, like, that was a blessing to be like, this is sometimes a hostile environment to what I believe. Sometimes, what's the word I'm thinking of? Like they'll let me exist in my little corner kind of environment.
You're a zealot
Yeah,
for this
yes,
new
yes,
way of thinking.
for seeking out something that is beyond what we all were kind of sitting in, that like, oh, this is just the way that it is, kind of, and I was so tired of that. I was like, this can't be it. And like, what's so odd is, I think in that moment, I would have said, this really sucks, like feeling so outside of, the norm on my campus, But I made so many great friendships and had so many people who were tagging along with that, who were accepting me and accepting the fact that I was not just going to sit still for the status quo. And just,
May I ask, did you come out at that point?
yes. So I actually was out, which is why it was, I think back and I think, that was brave because I could have very easily been kicked out for that at Hardin Simmons because that was in the student code of conduct. But you know, the School of Music is a little more accepting place than I would say at the time maybe Logsdon Seminary was. But I think back and I think to all the people who, stood by me, who pressed me on things to have really meaningful conversations about them. It was almost like a crash course in defending the way I believed God was and what I believed about Jesus' ministry in the world and how we follow him. And so I think, it's thinking back into those early 20s. I think in the moment I would have said, man, this is really hard. This is not easy. And I think back on it now and I say, I think if I wouldn't have had those, if I wouldn't have had the people around me to do that, if I wouldn't have been in a place that was so antithetical to the way I believed by the end of it, I wouldn't be so open to having more conversations with people who are different than me. I wouldn't have been so open to trying to repair a relationship with my parents, who obviously think very differently than me.